I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, the next steps. Republican lawmakers are moving closer to starting impeachment proceedings against President Biden. We're on Capitol Hill. Abortion in America. The White House responds to a measure protecting the unborn. Poised to strike. Auto workers are threatening to walk off the job. Why it could impact the U.S. economy. And standing tall. How the Vatican is honoring one of Korea's earliest martyrs. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of Blessed Apollinaris Franco. Our top story tonight, the U.S. government is a week closer to a shutdown with no agreement in sight. And House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is directing House committees to open a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden, focusing on possible overseas business dealings involving his son Hunter. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest.
Good evening, Tracy. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy made the announcement this afternoon saying that there is overwhelming evidence of corruption and cover-up, not just by President Biden and his family, but by the agencies in charge of investigating the overseas business dealings. He says over the past several months, House Republicans have uncovered serious and credible allegations.
Today, I am directing our House committee to open a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. This logical next step will give our committees the full power to gather all the facts and answers for the American public.
Many Republicans agree.
I think the evidence is overwhelming. I think the corruption is very clear. And then the impeachment inquiry would give Jamie Comer and the folks over at Oversight greater tools to be able to go actually see where the dollars are flowing.
When it comes to preventing a government shutdown, Congressman Chip Roy and other Freedom Caucus members could put a wrench into the Speaker's plans. McCarthy wants to pass another continuing resolution to keep the government open into November, giving Congress more time to pass spending bills. That's not what Freedom Caucus members want.
But I'm not going to do a 60-day, 90-day, 180-day CR rubber stamping the status quo.
Democrats blame Republicans' social agenda like fighting for the unborn for the impasse.
There are 10, 20 Republicans who want to outlaw abortion in this country as a ransom for actually letting a budget go forward, who want to do all sorts of ideological things. They are very isolated.
Senator James Langford tells me if a shutdown takes place, lawmakers better be willing to stay in D.C.
If we get to the end of the fiscal year, we've not done all the appropriations work. The government stays open at last year's level. It continues, but members of Congress and our staff are in session 7 days a week. We can't travel, and we can't move to any bill other than appropriations.
Lawmakers have until October 31st to come to an agreement. Economists say that if a shutdown does happen, it could hit the economy hard with higher unemployment and interest rates. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the White House is dismissing the impeachment inquiry as politically motivated. White House senior advisor Ian Sams tweeting today, House Republicans have been investigating the president for 9 months, and they have turned up no evidence of wrongdoing. His own GOP members have said so. He vowed to hold a vote to open impeachment. Now he flip-flopped because he doesn't have support. Extreme politics at its worst. The Biden administration takes a swipe at House Republicans who want to include pro-life protections in a defense spending bill. The White House says the measure would hurt the Pentagon's ability to recruit women. Supporters say the Defense Department should stay out of culture wars. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, the Biden administration says, quote, access to reproductive health care is critical to service members and their families. But that does not sit well with pro-life Republicans. And tonight, the clash is playing out in public.
The White House says President Joe Biden will veto a proposed defense spending bill if it passes Congress. The measure, known as H.R. 4365, includes pro-life protections. That's a problem for the White House, which writes, the administration opposes those provisions that limit access to non-covered reproductive health care. The Office of Management and Budget also complains Republican spending cuts would endanger critical services, writing, these levels would result in deep cuts to climate change and clean energy programs, essential nutrition services, law enforcement, consumer safety, education, and health care. But Republicans on Capitol Hill defend their proposals. California Representative Ken Calvert earlier wrote, this bill rejects many of the Biden administration's misguided funding proposals, such as climate change initiatives, far-left social policies, and shrinking the Navy, ensuring that the Department of Defense focuses on its mission, not culture wars. Meanwhile, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arriving in Russia on an armored train. North Korea looking for money and military technology. Russia needs munitions. Analysts say North Korea may have tens of millions of aging artillery shells and rockets. And at the State Department today,
any transfer between of arms from North Korea to Russia would violate multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions. It would be a sign of the desperate state in which the Russian government finds itself.
And Russian President Vladimir Putin is weighing in on the indictments against former President Donald Trump. Putin, speaking at an economic forum today, asserted that the criminal cases against Trump are political revenge that show the fundamental corruption of the United States.
Also tonight, the Biden administration is defending a controversial deal to release a hold on $6 billion of Iranian money in exchange for American prisoners being held there. Opponents of the deal say it's akin to handing money over to state sponsors of terror. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thank you, Owen. Well, the Vatican's peace envoy is set to visit China. Cardinal Matteo Zuppi will travel to the communist country later this week. It is part of the Holy See's initiative to find support in ending the war in Ukraine. A sweeping new study says there are more than 1,000 cases of clergy sexual abuse in the Catholic Church in Switzerland. The probe investigated claims dating back to the mid-20th century. Church leaders say the findings expose, quote, deep-rooted issues that must be answered. The president of Sri Lanka is appointing a committee to probe new allegations regarding the deadly Easter Sunday bombings back in 2019. The commission will be led by a retired Supreme Court judge. The move comes after a recent British TV program made claims about the deadly attack, saying in part that Sri Lanka's intelligence services knew about the strike and did nothing to prevent it, all in an effort to impact the presidential election later that year. Nearly 270 people were in the targeted strikes on Catholic churches and a hotel. Well, joining us now is Edward Clancy, Director of Outreach at Aid to the Church in Need, who has been following this story from the start. Ed, great to be with you again. So talk to us more about these recent claims made on British TV program. Were you at all surprised, Ed?
No, not at all. In fact, in 2016, the Christian community had warned the government that there was radical Islamic groups in some of the mosques fermenting the type of violence that happened in 2019. And then 2 weeks prior to the Easter bombings, India had provided intelligence to the Sri Lankan government. They even went as far as to list the names, addresses, and locations of the likely bombers, and nothing was done. And then after it, the then president promised a complete investigation, and for a year nothing happened. Of course, that followed with COVID, and then nothing has happened for 3 years. So this is actually 6 years in the making.
Ed, why do you think this information is coming out just now?
I think it's a combination of politics and also opportunism. You have the current president, who was prime minister at the time of the bombings. At that time, the president had kept him out of the security briefings. So his contention was that he didn't have any knowledge of the bombings. So now, in a sense, it's the political football that he can use to advance his cause, saying that he's doing something. Of course, it's almost 4 years after it happened. It's a little too late and maybe a little too little.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on this new commission? I mean, how effective do you think it will actually be?
You have to be hopeful, but just looking at the way things have gone within the government there's slight bit of hope. I don't think it's an exceeding amount of hope. So, we're going to have to trust that some evidence will come out, even if it's for political expediency, to show the truth, and maybe somebody will get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, what would you like to see done about all this, Ed?
Obviously, we would like to find those radical groups that are still present in Sri Lanka that are going to be targeting the Christians and other groups, and also for the church, the state there to do something to really help rebuild the Christian community, because they were damaged severely both by what happened on Easter Sunday and then since then because of the economic breakdown in Sri Lanka.
I'm curious, what have church leaders had to say about this, if anything, this forming of this new commission? I know one in particular, Cardinal Malcolm Ranjith, he was very outspoken following the attacks.
Yes, he was outspoken immediately and demanded that the police and the military be completely transparent and to get to the bottom of it. Of course, his words fell on deaf ears for the most part. Right at the end of that year in November, the then president resigned. Someone else took up the position. He lasted for about 4 months, and it's been a little bit of a revolving door. So there's really been no leadership, a lot of infighting. So that, unfortunately, the church is at the mercy of a government that doesn't seem to want to do what it should be doing.
Do we know what comes next here, Ed? Is there any kind of timetable when it comes to this commission?
Nothing is really known so far. I know that they said that they're looking for a 3-month investigation period, but again, I don't know what that means. So it's going to be see what comes, and hopefully this judge is a competent and honest person that will seek the truth.
Well, Ed, great to be with you. Thank you so much. It was very informational. We appreciate it.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including ready to walk. U.S. auto workers negotiate for a raise as the economy hangs in the balance, and season of creation, how the Vatican intends to take better care of the planet. Just a few days from a possible major strike by more than 140,000 members of the United Auto Workers Union. Negotiations are ongoing. Both sides say progress is being made. The current contract expires Thursday night. The workers are seeking a roughly 40% raise. It would elevate some jobs from $32 an hour to $47 an hour. A coalition of auto manufacturers is countering with a 10% hike. We go now to Anthony Canizzara, Associate Professor of International Business and Strategic Management at the Catholic University of America. Dr. Canizzara, great to be with you again. A lot to discuss here, including why this strike could really have a huge negative impact on the U.S. economy. But first off, tell us more about these negotiations. As we just heard, the sides seem pretty far apart. Is any progress being made?
Yes, thank you for having me. To your last question, I don't know if any progress is being made yet. The primary sticking point between the UAW and 3 of the major automakers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, who makes Jeep, is what to do with the industry's record profits it's made over the last couple years coming back from the pandemic. You recall demand was suppressed, or rather, supply was suppressed during the pandemic due to a chip shortage. And so natural supply and demand drove up the prices of automobiles. And as people started to come back to the consumer market, we saw sales at record high prices, resulting in record high profits. The union, as you said, wants a 40% pay increase. I think UAW President Shawn Fain has been repeating the record profits mean record contracts mantra for the past couple months now. Depending on which of the automakers you're talking about, they're asking for anywhere from a 9 to 15% pay increasing. And they also suggest that they want to use the remainder of that on the conversion to electric vehicles, right? So the current automakers in the US are far behind, other than Tesla, are far behind on the electric vehicle market. Most of them are taking losses on their electric vehicles investments. Last year, Ford, for example, announced that it wanted to increase investment in its EV operations to $50 billion through 2026. They argue this would help shore up the companies in the long run and still make the UAW workers the highest compensated auto workers in the US when compared to foreign auto manufacturers or Tesla. But despite that, they haven't seen much give on either side of the equation for with the UAW. Last week, UAW's announced that about 97% of its members voted in favor of authorizing a strike, which makes me think it's probably likely to go ahead.
Dr. Canizzara, everybody wants to know, well, how will this affect me? I mean, even if you're not in the market to buy a new car, how will this impact the economy?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The auto industry makes up a significant portion of the American economy. And we know that when these strikes happen, they do take a toll on the industry. Back in 2019, about 46,000 workers went on strike at GM alone. That strike lasted about 40 days, and estimates put the cost of that strike at over $3.5 billion for the automaker. The UAW now has the capacity to backstop a strike of that magnitude if they wanted to. They have about $820 million in their strike fund, which could put workers at all three of the automakers on strike for about 2 months. Estimates right now are that the industry would absorb probably a $5 billion profit loss for just a 10-day strike. So a 2-month strike would have a significant impact. The impact on the consumer, of course, is going to be significant too. We're just coming off of this supply or lack of supply in automobiles. And if Detroit goes offline, we're going to see return in the high prices that we had for consumers before.
We have about 30 seconds left or so. Another thing really on the radar for a lot of people right now, there appears to be a stalemate on Capitol Hill regarding a government shutdown. How do you see this playing out?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I can prognosticate at this point. You have on one side, Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, saying he'd like to pass at least a continuing resolution to keep the government open until a deal can be reached. You have on the other side, the House Freedom Caucus, which is about 45 seats in the House, who has been calling since last month when they issued a statement called No Security, No Funding, in opposition of a continuing resolution unless certain conditions are met. These include support for the Secure the Border Act, addressing weaponization of federal law enforcement towards political ends, ending woke policies in the Pentagon, enforcing rights for unborn children, and opposing more spending in Ukraine. It doesn't seem to me that they've made much progress over the last since that announcement was made last month. In fact, the House Freedom Caucus just had a joint press conference in the past hour in which several members reiterated that they're not going to be supporting the continuing resolution. So I think that it's possible that we might see a government shutdown at the end of the month. Oh,
Professor Canizar, we always appreciate your insights. Good to see you again. Thank you so much.
All right, and thank you for having me.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, tax-exempt status analysis of a court case involving a Catholic charity in Wisconsin. Plus, a witness of Jesus, why the Vatican is honoring one of Korea's earliest martyrs. Oral arguments began this week in a case involving a Catholic charity in Wisconsin. At issue, whether the Catholic Charities Bureau operated by the Diocese of Superior is actually religious and therefore exempt from certain state taxes. To help us shed more light on this case is Eric Rosbach, Vice President and Senior Counsel of the Becket Fund. Eric, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I understand that Becket is representing Catholic Charities Bureau in this case. Quickly, tell us more about it and why some argue that the group shouldn't be considered religious.
Right. So we are representing them in this case. It's a case about whether they qualify for a particular tax exemption that belongs to churches or church-controlled entities. And what's interesting about this case is that the state of Wisconsin says, well, because the Catholic Charities Bureau doesn't proselytize when it gives out benefits or helps the developmentally disabled, and it doesn't require everyone who works for it to be Catholic, therefore it's what it's doing is not religious. What's even worse is that they say that if anything that you do is not unique to religion, then it's secular. It doesn't count as religious anymore. And frankly, we find that to be an absurd position.
For those not familiar with Catholic Charities Bureau, can you tell us a little bit more about the group and who it serves, what it does?
Sure. It's just like Catholic Charities really almost anywhere across the country. It's an arm of the Diocese of Superior, which is the northern part of Wisconsin, and they carry out the charitable mission of the diocese in accordance with canon law. So they report to the Bishop of Superior, and they're really just the way that Catholics in the Diocese of Superior help other people.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, like in most states, religious nonprofits are exempt from paying into the state's unemployment programs, therefore, allowing them to be a part of other unemployment compensation programs. Eric, that said, what's the benefit of that, and why does Catholic Charities Bureau, why do they want to do that?
Well, so the exemption, which we think ought to apply to our clients, is worth, it's basically worth about several $100,000 over the years, and those are hundreds of thousands of dollars that it would be great to use to help the poor and the developmentally disabled that these ministries are doing, and Catholic Charities Bureau of the Diocese of Superior are doing. So I think it's really a question about whether money would be going into the state coffers as taxes or going to directly help the poor and the disabled.
I'm curious, we have about 30 seconds left or so, but if Catholic Charities Bureau, if it isn't deemed religious, what type of impact could that have, and how significant could that be? Could it have a broader impact?
Well, the reality is there's similar laws in all 50 states. So if the Wisconsin Supreme Court said, well, you don't count as religious because you're not direct. We've decided you're doing too much stuff that other agencies can do. That could really have a knock-on effect in other states. So this is really a nationwide issue.
Yeah, and what's next in this case, Eric?
Now we wait after the oral argument yesterday and find out what the court decides.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. God bless.
Take care.
Well, the Vatican has started its annual initiative to address caring for the planet. The 5-week season of creation seeks to remind the faithful of the importance of caring for and respecting the planet and its resources. Joining us now is Cristina Liano, Associate Director of the Laudato Si movement. Cristina, great to be with you today. Can you tell us a little bit more about the season of creation and what the theme is?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So the season of creation is a month-long celebration that begins on September 1st, the Feast of Creation, and runs through October 4th, the Feast of St. Francis. And it's a time when the Christian family worldwide honors God as our creator and the role that we have in caring for creation as part of our Christian vocation. And as you asked, the theme for this year is Let Justice and Peace Flow. And the symbol is the mighty river. And it draws from the scripture of Amos, where he says, let justice flow on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream.
Yeah, and also we know the season of creation ends on October 4th, and the Pope will publish, as announced, an update of the encyclical Laudato Si. Cristina, what are your expectations for this new publication, and what does it mean for the movement?
We are just stunned and incredibly grateful. We see this as an enormous gift from Pope Francis, and really it's unprecedented that merely 8 years after the encyclical, he's going to be releasing what he's calling Laudato Si 2, but to note that it is an apostolic exhortation, so it doesn't have the same amount of authority as the encyclical, but still it is a magisterial document. So we imagine, based on what we've heard and also just his recent messages as part of the season of creation, that he's going to be speaking about the urgency of the crisis. I think it's pretty evident with the wildfires, the unprecedented heat. We see this flooding right now in Libya. And it seems that the Pope is really driven by just the realities of our times and the fact that we aren't moving fast enough.
And Cristina, quickly before I let you go, on Laudato Si, the movement also extended a special invitation to join the campaign to pray and act for climate justice leading up to COP28. Tell us more about that.
We are calling on everybody to pray for all those government leaders who will be participating to make that transition away from fossil fuels and to take care of those victims of climate justice. So we're inviting people to pray, particularly in areas which are affected by climate injustice, and to post it in social media with the hashtag praying for you.
All right, and we're going to leave it right there. Cristina, great to be with you today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless.
And finally tonight, the Vatican is dedicating a new statue inside St. Peter's Basilica. The statue is of Korea's patron saint and one of the earliest martyrs. St. Andrew Kim Tae-gon was born in 1821 and became the country's first native priest. Pope Francis says the martyr's missionary zeal is a model for all Christians to follow. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.